final thoughts as we leave Texas. They're Texan, I get the concept. But how to explain their attitude towards the United States? Well, one or two, and it really only is, one or two talk about breaking away entirely. The vast majority are saying, don't ignore us. Don't treat us like any other state. And above all, to use the phrase that they themselves use here, don't mess with Texas. Back to Scotland, and to consider the future, let's reflect firstly upon Scotland's historic past. For inspiration and feeling contemplative, I turn to St Andrews, named after Scotland's patron saint. This is the chapel at Scotland's oldest university. I studied in St Andrews myself. Indeed, I sat my final exams right here in St Salvator's Quad. I was married in Sally's Chapel, just behind me. But this isn't a personal story. This is about the history of Scotland. Because today in St Andrews, researchers are studying all the data, all the details of the ancient pre-Union Scots Parliament. They want to glean everything they can about that period. When that old Scots Parliament was abolished at the time of the Union in 1707, the phrase that was used was, "There's an end of an auld sang." But it wasn't the end. It wasn't the end. There's a new song in Scotland today. New chorus, new verses, and new choices for the people of Scotland. What seems beyond doubt is that self-government is here to stay. But there remain those, a minority, who say we took the wrong road a decade ago.
I said back in the mid-90s, if Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, we won't be able to put it together again. A Scottish Parliament is not just for Christmas. And I meant that, and that's true. I'd say we're stuck with it. But I don't think it's working particularly well.
My journey is drawing to a close, but here at Holyrood there's no clear final destination. The political parties which support the Union set up the Calman Commission to review devolution 10 years on. That concluded that Holyrood now needs more powers to borrow money to control a bigger share of income tax.
I don't think it is sustainable that for a parliament to look to its long-term future based on the money that is entirely voted to it by another parliament, and that's why I think the whole issue of finance has got to move forward, and there's got to be more responsibility and more accountability, not only for what the parliament spends, but how it raises the money it spends.
And the danger is that if debate in the Scottish Parliament simply becomes dominated by whether we have a good or a bad deal from the UK, we actually don't look at the speck in our own eye, which is the nature of the Scottish society that we are creating. And I frankly think some reform to financial arrangements that force us to make some of the hard choices about the character of Scottish society would serve Scotland better.
That's now the core unionist message, that Scotland's soul can flourish inside Britain, but a Britain prepared to embrace further reform.
The union is not fit for purpose. Significant changes in England, and they need a voice. Changes in the three areas I've talked about. And at the end of the day, a global situation, a European situation, a UK situation, a world of great change. But it does seem that the union is very much fixed. And of course, as you well understand, Brian, a lot of Labour MPs feel that the whole concept of the union is in danger of breaking up. I think that's defeatist.
There's another huge potential conflict lurking in wait: Trident. It will surface again if and when there's a Conservative government at Westminster, while the SNP holds power at Holyrood. It's about political mandate, but also about morality, about Scotland's soul.
Defence is a United Kingdom issue. My party, for instance, supports Britain having a nuclear deterrent that is independent. This is important, and that's a mandate, if we're elected, that we will have to deliver. And I would hope that you wouldn't get, as I say, just as I respect the ability of the Scottish Minister and the Scottish Parliament to say, right, on tuition fees or prescription drugs or whatever, we take a different view. But likewise, the argument does go the other way, that if a government in Westminster has a mandate to deliver issues to do with nuclear deterrence or the size of the army or whatever, then they should be able to do that without the Scottish government trying to obstruct them.
And if that missile system is unwanted by the body politic of Scotland, unwanted by Scottish members of Parliament at Westminster, not wanted by the Scottish Parliament, then surely that Prime Minister would expect the Scottish Parliament to make its view known in every area and way that was open to it to do, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do.
So, potential conflict ahead there over an important, vital issue. But it also represents the more fundamental conflict underway. Who speaks for Scotland?
We're not free. We're not free to do the things that a normal nation does. We're told we can't do this, we can't do the next thing, we can't do power to create a fund like the Norwegians have done with their oil. We can't do all these things. We can't do half the things a normal nation does. Well, it's not sensible. It's not even practical.
The UK as a country is not a big country anymore. So I think that if people really think about it and reflect on the way the world's changing, they'll think, yes, it's good that we here in Scotland have more control of the things that concern us, but when it comes to issues to do with foreign affairs or defence, major questions to do with our economic role in the world, then being part of the UK makes sense for Scotland and for England.
Journey over, back in my Holyrood office. Daily politics here is driven by this fundamental conflict. It's the core fault line dividing politicians who might otherwise agree on policy issues. It's about how best we express Scotland's character, Scotland's soul.
If you live through enormous change, it's sometimes difficult to stop and say, my goodness, how far we've travelled. I mean, just a few years ago, the idea of a Scottish Parliament, if not absurd, was at best unlikely. Well, the Parliament's here, it's built, we're in it, it's working, it's been working 10 years, it's celebrating its 10th birthday. Then the idea of having a Scottish National Party government in that Parliament, whether it was because their system was rigged against us or because it was just not going to happen. The idea of Labour losing an election for the first time in 50 years in Scotland, if not absurd, was at least unlikely. Now that's happened, they lost, the SNP won. So the idea of having a Scotland which was independent is neither absurd nor unlikely. I think it's inevitable and couldn't come sooner as far as I'm concerned.
Scottishness is important, but I think the reason is that people look at the modern world and they say, we are in an interdependent world. Isolationism has got no real merit for any country in the world. To make the issue the border between Scotland and England, to make the issue whether you have your separate embassies or consulates. Look, this is a world where interconnection, interconnectedness, and people working together and people cooperating across frontiers is going to be even more important.
You know, I've pursued this Parliament pretty well every step of the way for the past decade, and I'll say this about identity. Holyrood has genuinely become Scotland's national forum. Every issue from the state of our health service to the state of our football team is raised here, is ventilated here. But the search for Scotland's soul is far from over. Will we follow the Texan trail and remain content to assert our identity within a broader union, perhaps with further reforms? Or will we look north and conclude, like Norway, that only independence can allow that identity to flourish? Scotland's future, Scotland's choice.